Hi, my name is Nick. Welcome back, hopefully. Unless this is your first one, in which case, just welcome. And tonight on Horror Time, we'll be talking about slashers. Slashers are a subgenre of the horror thriller films. Typically, they have to do with a psycho killer hunting down a group of people, usually in a confined space, picking them off one by one, sometimes several at a time. You guys know. You know what slashers are. You know. Halloween, Friday the 13th, stuff like that. I'm not going to be going into a crazy amount of detail because there's an awful lot of stuff. So, a lot of it's going to get glossed over, but just a brief history of the subgenre. The whole thing, sort of, you could trace the origins back to the Grand Guignol, I may not be saying that right, is a French puppet theater, which didn't actually have anything to do with horror to begin with. But they did do horror productions, and the visceral, gory nature of them made them extremely popular, and it just sort of seeped into the pop culture of the time. The early 19th century pop culture, or late 19th century, excuse me. Universal and a couple of other old school film studios back during the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and the 50s had early versions of what would later become slasher films like The Bat, The Old Dark House, The Cat and the Canary, the Agatha Christie's, 10 Little Indians, the movie version of that, and Then There Were None, which, by the way, that's a way better title, And Then There Were None. And Then There Were None probably more in line with modern day slashers than the others I named off, although, I don't know, The Bat's pretty close to. Anyway, after that, got movies like that definitely inspired by the Grand Guignol and going in a certain direction. But the slasher didn't really become a thing until 1960, when Alfred Hitchcock released Psycho. You guys know Psycho. You gotta know Psycho. I hope you know Psycho. One of the most famous horror films of all time, one of Alfred Hitchcock's most famous films of all time, maybe his most famous film of all time. There's some Hitchcock fans out there that are probably yelling at me. But Psycho had all the trappings of what would come later in slashers. A confined space, the Bates Motel, group of people who were unaware of the psycho killer that was in their midst. And then characters being picked off one by one. Hitchcock doesn't do that exactly. I mean, he does, but he does it in a, you know, Hitchcock kind of way. Anyway, so that led to a couple of other movies that were inspired by Psycho. Well, really, all of the slashers that came after Psycho were inspired by Psycho, but in the immediate aftermath of it. And then we get into the 1970s. And in 73, we have The Exorcist, but also we had the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which you guys are probably aware of too. It gave us Leatherface, who became a horror icon in his own right. Technically, is a slash, but I don't know. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is one of those where it doesn't exactly follow the rules, but it follows enough of the rules that you could consider it the, you know, the granddaddy of the slashers. Well, the daddy of the slashers after Psycho. But a year after that, we get Black Christmas. Most people consider that the, you know, the first real slasher flick. And you've got sorority girls in a house hunted down by an unseen killer, picked off one by one, until one of them survives. Maybe more than one of them. No, I think Olivia Hussey is the only one that goes, or Margot Kidder. It's been a long time since I've seen Black Christmas. Somebody probably lives. The killer doesn't die. Spoilers. Anyway, That was 1974. And then 1978. You guys probably know where I'm going with this. Halloween. John Carpenter's masterpiece of horror with Jamie Lee Curtis. It gave us Michael Myers, The Shape. Pretty much solidified all of the rules for what slashers were supposed to be and what they would continue to be for the next ever. Michael picking off these people one by one, the creative kills that slashers would become known for later, that fans would start loving to see later on in slashers. The ooh, how's this one gonna die? That sort of thing. It also sort of, and again, Leatherface did this too, but Halloween, it's almost like Halloween really kicked it off with the masked, gimmicky villain. Not that Michael Myers, was originally conceived as a gimmicky villain, but it sort of made that a thing that slashers did from then on. The villain had to have some sort of thing. It also introduced the survivor girl. One girl, usually, and by usually I mean almost always, the virgin of the group, the shy little girl, who not only survives the slasher movie, but ends up defeating the villain. It doesn't exactly happen that way in Halloween, and there are some exceptions to that rule, but usually is the way it goes. After that, we got a whole bunch of slasher flicks, definitely starting in 1980 and 1981. Silent Scream, Prom Night, Friday the 13th, My Bloody Valentine, The Burning, countless others. Friday the 13th, of course, would go on to become massively popular, just as popular as Halloween was in its own right, and got a slew of sequels. Speaking of sequels, that was a lot of what 1983, 82 and 83 saw. We got a Halloween sequel, of course. We got a Friday the 13th, another one of those. And then in 1984, we got, in my personal opinion, a game changer. Nightmare on Elm Street. So, Nightmare on Elm Street, it kind of continued with the, you gotta have a villain that has a gimmick, and Freddy Krueger had that. And again, I feel almost bad calling it a gimmick because it was so much more than that. It was brilliant. I'll probably have another video later on talking about how great, Nightmare on Elm Street and Freddy Krueger is, and how that all went crazy and beyond what everybody thought it would. But it's a slasher movie that does something radically different. It is not just a bunch of teenagers being picked off by a dude in a mask. It's a guy that invades these teenagers' dreams, and it has this big mythology behind it. It's very different. Also, Heather Langenkamp's character, Nancy, the survivor girl, one of the best examples of a main character in a horror film, bar none. Anyway, again, save that for another video. After that, from 84 to 88, so many people are going to get mad at me for saying this, but glossing over. From 84 to 88, what we got was a bunch of sequels. So many sequels to Nightmare on Elm Street, to Friday the 13th, to Halloween, to just sequels all over the place. And then in 1988, we do get something new, Child's Play. Chucky the Killer Doll shows up, and, another little gimmicky slasher villain. And he gets a sequel. It's actually pretty good, does pretty well. Then in 1991, he gets a third one, and it doesn't do so well, and it's kind of a commercial failure, too. So, the 90s were a pretty sad time for slasher flicks. Not just a sad time for slasher flicks, a sad time for horror movies in general. Really, Full Moon Features, the people that did Puppet Master and Subspecies, thrived during the 90s. But, again, much as I enjoyed those movies, they're not exactly art. They're not exactly great, either. But anyway, not a lot. The poor slasher, dead, as so many of its victims. Until 1996, when we get a little mini revival started off by Scream. Surprise, there's Wes Craven again, the guy that did Nightmare on Elm Street, changing it up. Scream is a meta horror film, a meta slasher. It references the fact that slashers are a thing that exist and that they have certain rules and criteria. And the movie pokes fun at that and also falls into it and it does a lot of stuff. Scream's great. You should watch Scream. We also get some other neat little slasher revival stuff like the Urban Legend movies and I Know What You Did Last Summer. This has a much better title than it was a movie. We also get Bride of Chucky in 1998, which was a nice little revival to, you know, the Child's Play franchise. This is a really fun movie. Halloween H2O. Halloween also gets another sequel there. Nice little revival to it. I mean, I guess it didn't really revive it that much since the thing we got after H2O was Resurrection, and that is garbage. But we also get in the early 2000s Freddy vs. Jason, which I don't care what you have to say about it. It's a fun movie. You sit down and you watch the whole thing. It's so much fun. There are definitely some problems with it. Another video. And then, you know, it sort of just brings us to the future of slashers. I mean, there were some, you know, hits and misses, some this and that in after Freddy vs. Jason. We do get Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon in 2006. And that was incredible. Another meta slasher. It's about a documentary group of documentarians that follow this self-proclaimed slasher around, and he shows you the tricks of the trade. It's pretty good. It's a really smart movie, and it's really cool. Everybody check it out. Also get All the Boys Love Mandy Lane. This is another sort of twist on the slasher. And in 2011, we got from Adam Wingard, You're Next, which to me kind of felt like the perfect direction for a new generation of slashers to go into. It has a survivor girl who's not necessarily shy, not necessarily virginal, and you know, just kills the crap out of. I don't want to spoil too much, but she's awesome, man. But yeah, so the future of slashers is sort of up in the air. I mean, we do have Bates Motel, which is a TV show, and The American Horror Story has elements of slashers in it. That is another TV show. So, you know, who knows where this whole thing is eventually going to go, but that's where we are now. The heyday definitely back in the early 80s, though. But we will see. Alright, so that was it for the history of the slasher. Like I said, I went through it really fast. I glossed over a lot of details, but whatever. We could cover some of them in other videos. Like always, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, angry things down there, right down there. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you watched the next video. Good night on what is hopefully Halloween night when this is being posted.